Story number 1. I was living in Elkins, West Virginia. The year it happened, 1980. I was 28 then, a mechanic by trade. Recently laid off and scraping by doing odd jobs around the village. It was a quiet place, mostly ex-miners, and their families, old picket fences, aging trucks. The kind of town where everybody knew your name and your grandmother's cornbread recipe. Nothing much ever happened. Then Liam disappeared. He was a weary little kid, 9 years old, thin as a rail, always running barefoot, scuffed knees and an oversized hand-me-down flannel shirt. His mother, Dana, was young too, barely in her 30s. She worked at the diner, raising him alone after her husband split. She did her best, no doubt about that. I used to fix her car when she couldn't afford the shop, and in return, she'd leave me extra pie or coffee when I came in. Nice girl, tired eyes. Liam would sit at the counter some nights, waiting for her shift to end, swinging his legs, doodling in a notebook. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Liam went into the woods behind the village and didn't come back. We searched for 3 days. Half the town combed the trees and hills. Dana was a wreck, shouting his name until her voice cracked, running until her legs gave out. We all knew those woods. They weren't deep, really patches of birch, fallen logs, steep hills where the old coal shafts once ran underground. But there were stories, talk of caverns that went on forever, shafts not mapped, burial pits from before the mines, things dug up and never talked about again, just whispers. Nobody took them seriously. When Liam came back, I was at Dana's. She hadn't slept since he vanished, so I'd stopped by to bring her some food. I remember I was putting a plate on the table when the screen door creaked open. Dana gasped and ran. I followed, expecting a sheriff, maybe someone with news, but it was Liam. He was standing there barefoot, shirt torn, mud on his legs, not crying, not smiling, just as still. He didn't say a word. Not then, not after. Just stood there while Dana hugged him like she was drowning. I stood off to the side, something tight in my gut, not from what I saw but from what I didn't. No scratches, no bruises, no bug bites. After 3 days in those woods, the kid looked like he'd just stepped outside for air, except his eyes were wrong, dull, glassy, not frightened, not relieved, just empty. Liam never spoke again. Not one word. Dana thought it was trauma, said he was in shock, took him to the clinic, then to a specialist in Charleston. Nothing. He didn't draw anymore either, just stared. Days passed. Then the death started. First was Mr. Hanley, the old man who ran the general store, found in his bed, peaceful, they said, like he'd just gone to sleep. Next was Claire Jennings, a church lady who'd brought Dana a casserole the day Liam came home. Then a little boy named Ben, who'd been in Liam's class, one after another, just gone, no signs, no illness, all in their sleep. Every single one of them had seen Liam since he came back. People talked, of course. That's what small towns do. Some said carbon monoxide. Others murmured about curses or spirits. Dana shut herself away, barely left the house, except to sit with Liam on the porch, rocking in silence. He'd just sit there beside her, legs dangling, hands in his lap, watching, always watching. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. I told myself the boy had been through hell, that grief was making people see patterns that weren't there. But then I saw Arthur. Arthur was a retired coal miner, lived a few houses down, widowed, big hands, quiet voice, tough as they came, the kind of man who never meddled in anything unless it was serious. One evening, I saw him walking down the road toward Dana's place with something in his hand, a worn leather pouch. He didn't knock, just stood at the edge of the yard and called out, "Boy," he said, "I need to speak to you." Liam turned his head slowly. Dana stood up, shielding him like a mother bear. Arthur didn't move. "What came back, ain't you?" he said. Dana shouted at him, told him to leave. I went out to calm things down, but Arthur just turned and walked away. I caught up with him, asked him what the hell he thought he was doing. He looked me square in the face and said, "We dug too deep." Then he told me a story I've never been able to shake. Back when Arthur was young, in the 40s, the mines expanded past the northern ridge. One crew broke into a pocket that wasn't on any map, a hollowed-out chamber deep in the rock lined with symbols none of them understood. The foreman reported it, but the company shut it up, ordered it sealed. Workers started dying after that. Accidents, collapses. One man went mad, said he saw faces in the walls. Arthur believed the boy had wandered into one of those old shafts, that whatever had been buried there took him and gave something back. I laughed it off, told him he was scaring himself, but I couldn't sleep that night. By the time the sixth person died, even the sheriff stopped calling it coincidence. We held a town meeting. Arguments broke out. Some wanted to call on the government. Others wanted to send Liam away. One man, drunk and sobbing, tried to burn Dana's house down. The sheriff stopped him. Dana didn't show up to the meeting, but Arthur did. "I can stop it," he said, "but you have to let me take the boy back." Voices rose again. Someone asked what he meant. Someone else told him to sit down, but I saw his hands. They were shaking. I'd never seen Arthur scared before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Liam's face, blank, watching, listening, but not hearing. I went to Dana's. She was sitting on the porch, Liam next to her, same as always. I told her what Arthur said. I begged her to listen. She didn't yell, just sat there, stroking Liam's hair, eyes hollow like his. "He's my son," she whispered. "Whatever he is, he's still mine. I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd taken the boy myself. But I didn't." The next morning, Dana was gone. So was Liam. We searched again. This time we found tracks hers and his heading into the woods. Nothing else. No note. No goodbye. That night, Arthur knocked on my door. He told me to come with him. Said there was one last thing we had to do. We hiked to the ridge where the old mine entrances lay buried under debris and time. He carried the same leather pouch. Inside was a small carved idol, black stone, etched with lines that hurt to look at. He said he'd taken it from that chamber all those years ago. Said it was his fault the dead had stirred, that the boy had been claimed as payment, that returning him wasn't enough. We buried the idol at midnight. A quiet ritual, no candles, no chants, just a hole in the earth. A few words in a language Arthur said he didn't remember learning. When it was done, he closed his eyes and we stood there, waiting. Nothing happened. No flash, no sound, just silence. After that night, the deaths stopped. No one else died in their sleep. No more strange behavior. The town tried to move on. Dana was never found. Neither was Liam. Some said they'd fled. Others whispered they'd been taken. Arthur never spoke of it again. He died 2 years later, peacefully, in his sleep. I stayed in Elkins a while longer, got back to work, but the boys' eyes never left me. Every time I saw a kid running through a yard or heard laughter from the schoolhouse, I remembered that hollow face. People don't like to talk about it anymore. It's easier to forget, easier to believe he just got lost, that the deaths were a freak illness, that nothing unnatural happened. But I know what I saw, what I felt. Sometimes I dream of the woods. I see Liam standing there, waiting, not older, not younger, just the same, watching me with those empty eyes. And when I wake up, I lie there in the dark, listening to the silence, wondering if the dead really do stay buried. Dan, if what we gave back was enough. Because I don't think it was him who returned, and I don't think it ever left. Story number 2. It started during the second month of lockdown. Just when the restlessness in Millfield had reached a boiling point, people had baked all the sourdough they could, walked every inch of the nearby trails, and exhausted every Zoom trivia game imaginable. The high school had gone fully remote. I was still adjusting to teaching from my apartment, using a ring light and pretending the quiet hum of loneliness didn't gnaw at me during office hours. My name's Avery. I teach English at Millfield High, this town, tucked between hills that people like to call mountains. Hadn't seen anything truly strange since the old coal mine caught fire in the 80s. So when the first lantern appeared on the ridge, behind the school, people assumed it was just someone being sentimental or maybe bored. It hovered, soft and warm, and it moved like it had purpose. Not blown by wind, not floating randomly, just watching. Then it was gone. At first, nobody said anything publicly, but I saw it again 2 nights later, this time from my kitchen window. It was far off, a small golden orb gliding silently above the treetops like it had been drawn there. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Whitmore. to make sure I wasn't going stir crazy. She saw it to. Mrs. Whitmore, the town's unofficial historian, was sharp as a blade despite being in her 70s. She used to teach at the same school I did, and she'd been cataloging Millfield's lore since before I was born. She invited me over that night, something she hadn't done since lockdown started. It's not the first time people have seen lights on those ridges, she said as we sipped lukewarm tea on her porch last time. It was just after the '58 flood. People said they were spirits. I smiled politely, trying not to show how unsettled I felt. We both knew this town had its share of ghost stories, most of them exaggerated to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods. But this felt different. Something about the way the lights moved. It wasn't whimsical. It was deliberate. The next day during class, I noticed Kyle Henderson, one of my juniors, wasn't logging into Zoom. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids missed class all the time now, with Wi-Fi issues and whatnot. But by the second day, I sent a message to his mother, no answer. That night, I got a text from a student. Did you see Kyle's TikTok? He went after the lanterns. My stomach dropped. I opened the app and searched. The video had already blown up. It showed Kyle standing at the edge of the woods, grinning, flashlight in hand. Okay, if this gets 100 likes, I'll follow the ghost lights and see what happens, he'd said into the camera. For real, guys, the next video, presumably filmed the same night, was dark and disjointed. Kyle breathing heavily, laughing nervously. I see one, it's right there. Holy no way. Then the light dipped out of view and Kyle's voice cut off mid-laugh. That was the last anyone heard from him. The police combed the woods. Drones were flown. Dogs sniffed every path from the park entrance to the quarry. Nothing. It was like he'd walked into thin air. School went into a spiral. Even online, the kids were shaken. Some claimed they heard whispers on their Zoom calls when they were alone. Others said they saw the lanterns appear right outside their bedroom windows, closer than ever before. I started getting emails from concerned parents, asking me to talk to their kids. I wasn't sure what to say. I was barely sleeping, and I'd started seeing the lanterns every night now. Always the same number, 5, drifting along the same ridge, sometimes in a line, sometimes in a loose circle, but always watching. Mrs. Whitmore called me 2 days after Kyle's disappearance. I think I know what they are, she said, voice tight. Come over. She had a stack of yellowed papers on her dining table. Old records, maps handwritten, letters. Did you know Millfield was near a Revolutionary War encampment? She asked. The 13th Continental Regiment passed through here in the winter of 1777. There was a skirmish barely mentioned in any history books. A massacre, really. Locals lured the soldiers into the woods, promised them shelter, then killed them for their supplies. I blinked. Why would they do that? She gave me a long look. Starvation, desperation. The town was dying. They saw an opportunity. It was hushed up, but people knew. The guilt of it sat heavy. That's when the stories of the lights began. I sat back, heart pounding. So you think the lanterns are what? Spirits of the dead soldiers? She nodded. Or a kind of sentry. A warning. A call. It sounded insane. But after everything, it also made sense. I spent the next few days obsessively studying the ridge. I took notes on the lanterns, movements. I tried to triangulate where they seemed to originate from. On the 4th night, I convinced Mrs. Whitmore to come with me. I wasn't about to go alone. We didn't go all the way into the woods, just far enough to reach the base of the hill. We stood quietly, watching. And then, as if responding to our presence, the lanterns appeared. 5 of them, silent, slow. I raised my phone to record, but it went black, completely dead, even though it had been at 90%. Then, one of the lanterns broke from the group and floated down toward us. I swear I could feel the air change, not colder, not warmer, just denser. It stopped about 10 feet away, pulsing faintly, not flickering, but steady like a heartbeat. Mrs. Whitmore took a step forward. They're waiting, she whispered. They want something. We went back the next morning. She had a theory that they weren't trying to hurt anyone, but were trapped, reliving some moment, some betrayal. She believed if we honored them properly, it might end. I didn't know how to feel. I just wanted Kyle found, or at least something, of him. She called in a few favors. A contact at the Historical Society provided the likely location of the skirmish, now overgrown and forgotten behind an old barn. We brought small flags, candles, even a recorded reading of the soldier names from the regiment list. Mrs. Whitmore insisted on doing it right. We held a memorial, just the two of us. As she read the names, the lanterns gathered again, this time in a perfect semicircle around us. I wasn't afraid. I felt something else, sadness, maybe longing. They hovered silently until the last name was spoken. Then they blinked out, one by one, just gone. We waited. Nothing returned. The next day, a volunteer searcher stumbled onto something half buried in the dirt at the skirmish site. It was a phone. Kyle's, still intact, though corroded by mud and moisture. Nearby, bones were found, human remains. Forensics later confirmed they belonged to a Revolutionary War soldier. Kyle was never found, but I believe he was led there, that somehow, by chasing those lights, he'd been brought to that spot. Not killed, not taken, just guided. The town put up a small plaque, quietly, without ceremony. Site of the Lost Regiment, 1777. It reads, nothing about Kyle. But I know. The lanterns never came back. Not once, not a single flicker. And yet, sometimes, when I'm walking past the ridge on a quiet night, I pause and listen. Not for sounds, but for that feeling, that silent pressure in the air. And when I do, I wonder, were they ever ghosts, or were they just waiting for someone to finally see them? Either way, I won't follow the lights again. Once was enough. Story number 3. I never planned on telling anyone this for a long time. I believed if I kept it locked away, maybe it wouldn't feel real, maybe I could pretend it hadn't happened. But every time I close my eyes, I see Eleanor's face through that barred hospital window. So here I am, and here's the story. Back in 1955, I was a parish priest assigned to a modest church just off the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia. The place was quiet, mostly farmers and their families, people stuck to themselves, but they were kind in that small-town way, offering pies and stories in equal measure. I didn't have much to do besides Sunday sermons and checking in on folks now and then. That's how I got to know Eleanor and her husband Marcus. They lived in a stone cottage beside a toll booth that stood on one of the old roads feeding into the parkway. The booth had been there longer than the new highway system, and technically, it wasn't even needed anymore. But Marcus kept it going, charging 50 cents to pass through. Most folks found a way around it, but tourists, those who didn't know any better, would stop and pay. Eleanor started coming to confession every week around late summer. She wasn't particularly religious before that. I always remembered her as someone cheerful and sharp-tongued, but that first week she came in, she was quiet, her hands shaking. She said something was wrong with Marcus. Not just wrong like a husband being moody or distant, wrong like he wasn't Marcus anymore. He doesn't sleep, she said, barely above a whisper. I lie awake all night, and I can hear him just sitting there, breathing, waiting. And Father, he doesn't blink anymore, not once since that storm. She was referring to a thunderstorm that had rolled through 2 weeks earlier, violent, enough to knock out power and tear up a few trees. Marcus had been at the booth when it hit, and when Eleanor ran out to get him, she said he was already standing there, completely dry despite the downpour, just staring at her. I told her maybe it was stress or grief, sometimes trauma showed up in strange ways, but she gripped my arm and said, "He talks in riddles now. Not even words I understand. It's like he's performing a part he doesn't fully grasp." I visited them the following Monday. Marcus greeted me like always, polite, cordial, but there was a strange rhythm to him. His smile came too late. His nods lasted a second too long. It was like he had memorized how to be a person, but was still fine-tuning the performance. When I asked how he was, he said, "Each coin buys passage, each passage feeds the road. All things must balance." That would have sounded like poetry if it weren't for the way he said it. Not with the cadence of someone reflecting, but like he was reading a recipe aloud. I stayed for tea, more out of obligation than comfort. Eleanor sat across from him, eyes fixed on his hands the entire time. The disappearances began soon after. Nothing made the papers not right away. It was always a missing tourist or delayed traveler. But in our town, word spread fast. A family of 3 in a station wagon last seen on Route 12. A couple in a Volkswagen gone. Every single one had passed through the toll booth, Eleanor told me. She kept a notebook by the kitchen window, recording license plates and dates. I asked the sheriff to look into it. He was skeptical but promised to drive by the booth now and then. 2 days later, I found him in the back pew of my church, white as snow. He didn't give me details, only said, "That man's eyes. He didn't blink. Not once. Like he was waiting for something behind me, not looking at me at all. He never went back." Eleanor came to me one night soaked in sweat, hands cut and bleeding. "They screamed," she whispered. "Last night, another one. I saw it. A man in a red Buick. Marcus took the coin, looked into his eyes, and it was like the man dissolved. Just faded out. Like something swallowed him." I offered to take her away, but she refused. She said she had to stop it, that she knew how. She didn't tell me the details, but I got the call just after midnight 2 nights later. Smoke could be seen from the church steeple. By the time I arrived, the booth and the cottage were fully engulfed in flames. Eleanor stood outside, her nightgown blackened with soot, her hair half burned off, staring into the fire. Marcus didn't make it out. I thought that was the end of it. I told myself Eleanor had snapped. I even began to believe maybe all of it had been in her head. Maybe she'd had a mental break and imagined the whole thing. But the next morning, the booth was back, not rebuilt over time, back, fully intact, no ash, no signs of burning, just there. And Marcus was in it, wearing the same gray uniform, holding the same coin box. He waved at me as I drove past, and though I didn't stop, I saw it in the rearview mirror. He didn't blink. Once. Eleanor was taken to a hospital 3 towns over. I visited her twice before they transferred her to a more secure institution. The second time I came, she handed me a leather-bound journal. "You saw it too," she said. "Calm now. That means I'm not insane." I didn't want to read it. For days, it sat on my desk. When I finally opened it, I found records pages of names, dates, vehicle descriptions, notes on what Marcus had said, the things she had heard at night, dreams she couldn't explain. One entry stood out. "I followed him one night. There's a path behind the booth that isn't there in the day. It curves where it shouldn't. The trees lean the wrong way. I heard voices begging to be let out. I turned back, but Marcus didn't." There was one more page, written just before the fire. "It's not him. It's something in his skin, wearing him like a coat. I know how to end it. Fire cleanses. But if I fail, don't go near the booth. Don't let anyone stop. That place doesn't take tolls, it takes people, one coin at a time." I left the church a month later, moved north. I've told myself it was for health reasons or to be closer to my sister. But the truth is, I couldn't bear to drive past that booth again, and I never did. Over the years, I've checked records, quietly, always from afar, every so often. There's another disappearance along that stretch. A tourist vanishes. A couple never makes their hotel reservation. It never draws much attention, it's all too spread out, too disconnected. I once called the county office under a false name, asking about the old toll booth. They told me it had been decommissioned decades ago. No one's supposed to be manning it, but he's still there. I'm telling you this not because I expect you to believe me. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But if you ever find yourself driving through that part of Virginia and you come across a lonely little booth with a man who doesn't blink, don't stop. No matter what he says, no matter how official he looks, just keep driving. And if you see Eleanor, if they ever let her out, tell her I read the journal. Tell her I believe her. Story number 4. We were 17 when the creek dried up in Dry Fork. It had been an unusually hot summer, sure, but no one expected the water to just vanish. One day it was there, slow and lazy as always, and the next it was nothing but cracked, mud and moss-covered rocks. Folks said it was just the heat, but we all knew it was something else. You could feel it, like when your skin prickles before a storm, except the sky stayed clear. It was Gavin who first mentioned the church. He'd heard it from his uncle. Some story about a building that got flooded when the dam upstream was built. In the 50s, they say a whole congregation was trapped inside. he said, grinning like he always did when trying to creep someone out. Preacher locked the doors, said God told him to do it. That was Gavin, always pushing the line. Between thrill and fear, Ray and Mick didn't say anything at first. Ray was the quiet, steady one. She only spoke when it mattered. Mick was different, non-binary, tough as hell. Always in some patched-up boots and ripped jeans, like they were stitched together. From pieces of rebellion, they'd roll their eyes at Gavin's stories, but always showed up when it was time to explore. So we went down there, the four of us, Gavin, Ray, Mick, and me. We parked up near the ranger station, which was already half abandoned, most of the time, and hiked down past the old fishing trail. There was no water left, just muck and bones of catfish that didn't make it. Then we saw it, a roofline jutting from the mud like something trying to climb back into the world. The church. It wasn't huge, just a wooden shell, really. The steeple was gone, and the bell was rusted through, half sunken in the earth. But the door was intact. It was swollen from years underwater, but we forced it open. The air inside was thick, still wet, like it hadn't realized the flood was gone. We didn't say much. Gavin pulled out his flashlight and swept it across the walls, revealing rotting pews and a pulpit at the far end. Crosses carved into the walls, Bible pages stuck to the floor like barnacles. "This is sick," he whispered. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. We didn't stay long, maybe 20 minutes, just long enough to poke around and feel like we'd done something dangerous. We didn't take anything, didn't even touch much. But that night, the dreams started. I was burning. That was all there was to it. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Just heat and smoke, and the smell of blistering flesh, and this awful sound. Not quite a voice, not quite music. Something in between. When I woke up, my sheets were damp with sweat, and my lungs felt scorched. I thought it was just a nightmare, until Gavin called. "You had it too," he said, "didn't you?" By the next day, Ray and Mick had called me. As well, all of us had the same dream, word for word. It was too exact. Even the sound. We promised not to go back. Swore it was just our minds screwing with us. But the next night, it came again. And the next, worse every time. We started seeing things during the day. Flashes of fire in mirrors, smoke curling, out of vents that weren't on. I caught myself mumbling prayers in my sleep, prayers I didn't know. Then Gavin died. He was out by his uncle's barn when it happened. The official report said he fell asleep in the loft with a lit cigarette. But that wasn't Gavin. He never smoked. The fire spread fast, burned half the barn down before anyone could get to him. They said he was already gone before they pulled him out. At his funeral, I saw burns on his arms. Not like fire burns, more like brands, shapes I recognized from the church walls. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Mick, no words, just a photo. It was their bedroom, lit by candlelight, and written on the wall in soot was a single word: redeem. We met up the next morning. All three of us looked like hell. Ray's hands were trembling. Mick had scratches on their neck. Said they woke up to the sound of someone whispering in their ear. "We need to go back," I said. Surprising even myself. We missed something. Mick was dead against it. Ray didn't speak. But when I left, they followed. The second time, we entered the church. It was like it had been waiting for us. The air was colder, though the sun was burning above us. Inside, the walls were darker, charred, like they'd begun to burn from the inside out. There was writing, too, freshly scrawled in ash. "Confess and be cleansed." Ray vomited. Mick stormed out. I walked to the pulpit. Underneath it, I found a trapdoor. It was warped and rotten, but it opened with a groan. Stairs led into the earth. I don't know what made me go down. I just did. It wasn't a basement. It was more like a crypt. Low ceiling, stone walls, slick with mildew, and in the center, an altar, burnt black. Round it were bones. Human, maybe. I didn't stay long enough to count. Behind me, Ray called my name. Her voice was wrong, hollow. I turned to find her standing at the base of the stairs, crying. Her eyes were wild, and she was clutching her arm. "Burns, fresh, I didn't do anything." She kept saying, "I didn't do anything." We ran, all three of us, Back up, out, and into the daylight. We didn't talk on the drive home. I dropped them off and went straight to my room. That night, the dream didn't just come. It consumed me. I woke up choking on smoke. My bed was smoldering. The fire alarm was screaming. My mom burst in with a bucket of water before the fire could spread. I told her it was a candle that tipped. She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. 2 days later, Ray died. She was found in her room, curled in the corner. No open flame, no evidence of fire, but her skin was covered in burns. The official report was inconclusive. Mick stopped answering my calls. I drove to their house. Their mom said they'd checked into a motel up by the highway, said they weren't right in the head. I found the place, banged on the door until they let me in. They looked worse than I'd ever seen them, gaunt, pale, eyes bloodshot from crying or not sleeping. Next, they said, I know it. I told them, we had to burn the church, destroy it. That's where it all started. Maybe if we ended it, we could stop the cycle. They looked at me like I was already dead. That night, I waited until after midnight, loaded my dad's gas can into the trunk and drove to Dry Fork. The ranger station was dark. No one ever stayed. That late, I hiked down with my flashlight, shaking so hard I nearly fell twice. The creek bed felt colder now. Wrong. The church loomed ahead, a skeleton of wood and rot. I didn't hesitate. I doused the walls, the door, the pews inside, every surface soaked. I lit the match with trembling fingers and dropped it at the threshold. The fire took quickly, too quickly, like the place had been waiting to burn. The flames danced unnaturally high, and from within I heard something. Not screams exactly, more like a hymn being sung backward, like whatever was inside was finally being pulled down. I stood there until the roof collapsed, until the flames turned to embers and the sky began to gray with dawn. As I turned to leave, I heard water, not just dripping, flowing. By the time I reached the top of the trail, the creek had started to fill, a steady trickle first, then a stream. By noon, it was as if it had never dried up at all. Mick never answered my calls again. I found out a week later they'd checked out of the motel and left town. No one's heard from them since. As for me, the dreams stopped. No more fire, no more whispers. But I still see the scars on my arms, my ribs, faint outlines of symbols I never learned, but somehow understand. I haven't been back to Dry Fork since, and I never will. The church is gone, sure, but sometimes, late at night, I still wake up choking on smoke that isn't there. And I remember what was written on the wall that last day: confess and be cleansed. I don't know what our sin was, but I know we paid for it.